Hi, I'm Tracy Soltis, your leading health and nutrition coach and molecular biologist. I've consulted with hundreds of people around the world on their human journey. So if you're a seeker looking for answers, information and knowledge, you'll find it here. Come on a journey with me as I explore the science, the physical body, and the cognitive and energetic space of what it really means to be human. All right, welcome back everybody. And today I've got an amazing guest joining me on the couch. His name is Jason Bart. Hi, Jason.
Hello.
Jason is a transformational coach in Perth, Western Australia. His areas of focus in work is to empower men to own their magnificence. I love the use of that word. And help women to release trauma around men. Jason has been diving deep into what it means to walk this earth with passion and grace for well over a decade now. Strongly influenced by his work with sacred sexuality, tantra, and gene keys, he has developed a unique ability to tune into what is moving energetically in the body and witness without judgment the very stories that are playing out in the mind. Jason is available for one-on-one intuitive sessions that incorporate a wide variety of modalities to help you shine the light that's within you. He is also facilitating a range of workshops and gatherings designed to empower our truth and foster our ability to share this with grace. And today we're going to be talking about toxic masculinity from a man's perspective. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Tracy.
I'm really glad you're here.
Me too.
It's really nice to see your beautiful face.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a little while.
It has.
But I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, me too. And how are you going with everything in general? Like, how's life?
Life is pretty good. Life is pretty wild. The world is pretty mad out there. But I think that this is designed to, that storm that is brewing so that everything gets a nice cleanse and we can have a fresh start. That's where we are, but because of that, there's a lot of turbulence in the air, and the turbulence in the world is felt inside as well. So that's all happening. So when people ask how you're doing, it's kind of like all of the things.
I know, right? And how do you say that? So we always default, don't we? We always go, "Yeah, I'm great," but you're right, because everything is pretty turbulent. Like I feel that myself. There's lots of unsettled stuff going on in the world in general. And sometimes you do have to just glaze over it and just go, yeah, you know what? In the bigger scheme of things, I am actually doing pretty well, even though I've got all of this stuff going on. Yeah. Don't you reckon?
Definitely. And those things are like grist for the mill that they talk about, you make the flour goes in the oven and we give it some fire and from there we get some nice bread.
Yeah, I love it. Gluten-free bread.
If that's what you like, for sure.
All right. So we know that today's topic is going to be pretty intense and it's going to be pretty heavy, right? So
can be.
We had a little chat about this before we started recording. And so I'm going to make sure that you jump in here if I forget anything. But we want to make sure that if you're listening to this episode, that if anything comes up for you that may feel negative or triggering, or there's something that doesn't sit well, or you've had a little bit of agitation, we want you to seek support for that and take a pause. So nothing in this episode is intended to send you off into a tizzy of anger and, fear or anything like that. It's all coming from a place of love and kindness and well thought intention. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And, this is I'm going to speak from my perspective and Tracy will do the same. Yeah. And then from there, it's really about the conversation and opening up that conversation more than what I say is true or what you say is true, and really bringing the space to hear each other and bring the dialogue. It's the intention behind this conversation from my point.
Yes, and I want to just highlight exactly what you've just said in that perspective of truth, because that's something that I reinforce constantly, is that any information that you receive is just one perspective of truth, right? And, nothing is black and white, especially in the world that we live in. There's no such thing. So there's all this different field of different, color arrangements of the blending together of black and white, into this beautiful gray. So just take it as information. It's one perspective. Perhaps you'll resonate with all of this. right? And you'd be like, yes.
Finally, someone gets it like I
Someone
do.
gets it, right? And amazing. I'd love to hear that feedback from you as well, either way, because this is what it's all about. So should we get to it?
Let's do it.
So I've got on my notes here. Let's talk about toxic masculinity. Yeah. First of all, what is it?
Well, I think there are different ways to look at it, but in many ways, toxic masculinity now is masculinity in a way that offends me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that this is actually one of the most powerful words in our language right now is I'm offended.
Yeah.
And we just are not allowed to offend anyone. So
yeah.
we don't even have permission to be ourselves because that might offend someone. Whereas back in the day, be true to yourself. And I hope that that's where we're going to be moving forward as well. The more we can be authentic with ourselves and the more, like you were saying, we have that ability to self-soothe and look after ourselves. If something doesn't feel good, then step away or see where that trigger is and why is that coming up as such a strong trigger. Because if we really are solid in ourselves, then someone's perspective is just their perspective.
Yeah.
Full stop. It doesn't actually have to influence me.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are powers out there that do influence our day-to-day lives, and a lot of that can be considered toxic. But a lot of it, I believe, isn't actually masculinity that is being labelled as the toxic masculine.
Yeah.
A lot of the manipulation that's going on in the world and the way that people are being communicated to is being labelled as toxic masculine. But manipulation is really an art of the feminine.
Yeah, isn't it? Exactly. There's a shadow feminine coming right out there.
Yeah. And it's just that labeling and branding that the patriarchy is bad, the patriarchy has to die, and men are to blame for where we are right now.
Yeah, I know. And this is such a massive topic. And I'm going back to your first point of being offended. I try to own myself as much as possible, but I can't deny the fact that I do have like a little lingering part in my tummy of anxiety whenever I go to talk about something because, I am quite open. I do just tend to go blah because this is who I am. And everyone that knows me and loves me knows that that's who I am and that's how I just live my life. And occasionally I do offend people and it's not intentional and it's not pointed. It's not on purpose. It's never on purpose. It's always just the way that I view something. And so I just say what I'm thinking and it can cause offense.
Yeah. And even when sometimes that is just being projected into the field almost as a question of like, how do you feel about this? Yeah. Then all of a sudden, do you think about it like that? And then all of a sudden people get labelled as opposed to opening the thought and having a discussion about it. It's like Jason is like that or Tracy is like that. And then all of a sudden we need to be like that forevermore and it doesn't matter what we're saying anymore.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of identity politics that goes on in society as well as in politics where we don't look at what people are doing or what people are saying, but we look at how we've labelled them and that's how they are and the message gets lost.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate.
I feel so exhausted by labels and it's funny you say that because I know there's a little bit like to the side of what we're talking about, but I get really exhausted by being put into a box. Like I find it really suffocating. Like when someone labels me as something, it's like, well, no, actually I'm all things. Right. It's just that my expression of a certain thing comes out different at different times. Yeah. But I'm actually all of the things comprised into one being and that my expression of that just happens to be whatever it is at this given time, right? It doesn't mean I'm this or that or up or down or left or right. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. And sometimes it's just fed by what happened in the morning in a dynamic that you had with someone and then you kind of vent that as an expression and then all of a sudden there goes the branding. I know. And it's exhausting. And I feel like we could talk about that particular thing like for the entire episode because the label thing would, But let's talk about the masculine and the man and how this has happened and how we've got to this point now where anything that happens in the world that's negative or got that negative context over the top it has suddenly become like a masculine issue. Yeah. And look, I think that it's easy to portray because of the way society is created, and the people that are in power and the people that have been in the strongest influence have been men. But what I really want to speak to as well is this polarity between the masculine and feminine. And from my understanding, the masculine and feminine are always in equal balance.
Yeah.
And it's like a magnet, right? You can't have a north pole of a magnet stronger than the south pole of a magnet. They are equal.
Yeah.
And so when you've got the toxic masculine who is more expressive in the doing in the world, it's very easy to see the toxic masculine and what he does. Whereas the toxic feminine, which is often that dialogue and even sometimes the inner dialogue that's going on and the feelings that are happening and not that wanting to feel into our feelings, that's where the toxic feminine is kind of leading the action of the masculine within, whether you're a male or a female, that doesn't get as acknowledged because it's not as easily identifiable. Like the masculine's quite easy to quantify in his actions, where the feminine is much harder to quantify in what she does and her influence. So it's kind of the easy scapegoat is the masculine.
Yeah. And it's because it's all like we had feminism come through, right? So everything's been like anti-male, right? And all these messages. And I was thinking about, okay, I do a lot of my thinking in the shower, right? The water, just something about it. I do all my thinking in the shower. And I was thinking about this episode this morning about, thinking about the impact that feminism has had on my generation and the fact that, we went from one social setting of a very strong patriarchy, where roles were very defined and everything was kind of labelled, and ruled out. And then all of a sudden this change happened, and the generation of women in my shoes all of a sudden had this immense amount of pressure to do all of the things, because now we've got all these freedoms, right, that we didn't have before. And so now we have to be everything to everybody all of the time, and it's exhausting. And so all of the women are in burnout. There's not a single woman that comes and sees me that's not in burnout. Like, that's a fact, right?
Yeah.
That's why they come and they're searching for wellness coaches, because they're all burnt out, right? They're not working with their cycles. They're not working with, balance and self-care, and they're putting everything else ahead of themselves and not taking time out for them. It's a whole issue, right?
And the polarity of that is as women are empowered to be all things, men are being disempowered to be anything, right? So most of the men that I see are completely lost. They don't know what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. They don't feel empowered to be themselves and even acknowledging what is true, because, say, for example, some anger comes up, and it's really healthy for us to feel our anger and express that in a healthy way. But even if it's done in a healthy way, it's kind of frowned upon that, now you're being angry and that's toxic. And it's straight away being labelled. Some emotions are, if you're being aggressive, or maybe not aggressive, but angry, that's toxic. But then if you're being vulnerable and weak, that's also toxic.
I know. You can't win.
No.
Like, you literally can't win. Because you've got this dynamic in a relationship, and we're talking a male-female relationship, where at home, so the woman's doing all of the things, so the male's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, she looks happy doing all of the things, right? But the woman is like keeping quiet and not actually handing anything over. So the man loses all of his power, because he's not like, he doesn't feel like he's providing or protecting for anything. You've got the woman going into burnout, and then you've got this build-up of toxic behaviour between both of them, like where she's getting resentful, and he's feeling like no one listens to me, no one sees me. And that's the thing, right? That's going on.
And we both get resentful at each other for either not fulfilling the roles that we feel that they should be, the feminine feeling not held and supported and provided for. And then the man feeling that he's not even allowed to do that because I'm an individual woman and I don't need a man. And it's,
which is so really untrue, which is very untrue. Let's just call that out. It's completely untrue. And it really upsets me, because I was that person. I don't need anyone. I've been there. Like, that's exactly like where I started, right? And I had to do all of this work and all of these realizations that happened to me to go, oh my gosh, I'm not even in the real feminine, because I haven't surrendered it anything. I'm constantly worn out because I'm constantly asking my own masculine inside to step forward constantly.
Right.
And he's sick of it.
Yeah.
And so my feminine is like getting all shadowy and manipulative and like resentful and angry.
Yeah.
That's not healthy. That was not healthy for me at all because I was so caught up in this ideal of having to do everything for myself because it's weak if I don't. If it's weak, if I'm a female at home who doesn't do all of the things that I've now been gifted to do, right? And, you know, all of these other women who, you know, went forward and went, now you can do all of these things.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'll do all of these things. Okay, well, I don't need a man anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, how do I hold all this together, right?
And this is what you were saying before, initially, where there was what you labelled a patriarchal society where the men were working and the women were the home bearers, that is balanced, right? And that a lot of women, if you speak to them, and I love the fact that there are new couples that are coming through and the women are like, all I want to do is be a mother, like the best that I can, and give all of my resources to caring for my family in its wholeness. And that's beautiful. That's gorgeous. And of course, you know, being able to care for ourselves is, you know, that interdependence where, look, I can do all of the things, but right now what I want to do is care for the family, and the man wants to care for the family and finding their own roles in that. But it's really hard because when everyone's being activated and exhausted and being resentful at each other, when, for example, there's a moment where the masculine does go, all right, you want me to feel things, now I'm going to go into my vulnerability, then what that vulnerability wants to be met with is a solid masculine and held and witnessed in that. And what it's often being met with is this toxic, striving, achieving masculine that's like, stop being so weak, and here you are like being vulnerable and deep into your feelings. And it's like, how am I supposed to do this then? Like, you want me to feel things, but I'm not allowed to. You want me to be the provider, but I'm not allowed to because you want to be strong. And you know, these are the trigger points that are coming up for listeners right now, I'm sure. We did set the warning. Let's be clear. You know, I can feel it, you know, because it is in the ethos of where we are right now. This is,
as a society, this is exactly where we're at. And
you know, what really warms my heart is, like I was saying, those younger generations that I'm witnessing, and they're going, I'm over this whole story. Like, I want to find new ways to really do this and come into a wholesome family, and not trying to overachieve against my partner, but really come into unison and build a solid foundation to bring this new generation up into even more balance and even more wholesome in what feels authentic in the human. And I was pondering around this, around, you know, where does it come from within me as well, this toxicity? And part of it comes from not feeling like I was allowed to be myself fully, because my dad was like, this is what a man looks like. And if you're not performing like this, then you're not being a man. And you need to be a man, because when he was growing up and when his father was growing up, if you did show vulnerability, then that alpha game was so much stronger that you would be vulnerable and taken advantage of. And there's a difference between being vulnerable and being weak.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to know from your experience, maybe you've got someone in mind, or maybe it's your own personal experience, but I'm going to dig deep, right? So from a man's perspective, what is the feeling that comes from not feeling seen and heard when you do go to someone, you are vulnerable, right? And you are showing up and you're going, okay, here's all of me. Like, what happens to the man?
There's a feeling of betrayal. Right? Because it's almost like I get a strong invitation to go to a place which is vulnerable and sensitive and you know, is hard to go to. And then going there, it's almost like taking off all of my armor and showing you my heart so that you can just stab me with it. That's what it feels like. And it's scary and it's disempowering, and it creates this safety mechanism of I can't go there, right? And that once bitten, twice shy. Once you go there and you feel that, for myself, I feel that I go into that vulnerability, and then that vulnerability gets attacked.
Yeah.
Then my safety mechanism is like, I can't go there. I can't be vulnerable with my partner, or even sometimes with other men as well.
Yeah. What would be some of your advice for women who are in a relationship with a man who is trying to pull down this armor and is trying to show themselves? Like, what advice would you give them so that we can be more supportive?
I think one of the first things is to recognize the courage that it takes to be vulnerable for a man, because a lot of men have never cried in their whole life, right? So that's how strong their armor is against their feelings.
Yeah.
If they then step into that, the most important thing is to hold that secure, mature masculine of just witnessing without judgment and providing safety for those feelings to be felt and acknowledging that it's fair enough that you feel like that. That anytime anyone goes into vulnerability, the first thing is to acknowledge that it's fair enough, because they wouldn't be there if it wasn't true for them, right? Yeah. And then once you're holding that, really support that place and allow them to know that it's okay. And it's important to define the difference between feeling a feeling and dwelling in that feeling, right? And you need to give it some time, but you don't want it to just live on forever and ever. Just don't attack his vulnerability and don't portray or make him feel that there is weakness in vulnerability.
Yeah. Do you know what, one of the things that because while you're talking about this and I'm thinking about the word witness, and I know that we know what that kind of means, but some of the listeners might not understand what that means. And I think when I draw on my own experience, when I'm witnessing my husband, Drew, everyone's familiar with Drew, and he's overdoing a lot of work at the moment himself, there's a timing for it. So there needs to be an appropriation of, are you in a space where you're able to hold, a container for me, a safe container, so that I'm able to share something with you? Because that's really important, because if we throw things out on people when they're not ready, it can be a little bit like, it can go in the wrong way.
It really can.
Yeah, and so it could go in a direction that then your armor just goes whoop, straight back up. You go, I'm not doing that again. That was way too complicated, right? And so I think from my experience, like what Drew and I do is he always asks and I always ask, like, when is a good time? Can we sit down together? And the important thing here is to not take the words personal. So you need to be in a space where you're able to hold the information away from you and not listen to those words as though they're attacking you, right? But they're just words of information that this other being needs to get out, that they need to be heard. Yeah. So I think that's the thing sometimes that happens for people is they're sitting in a situation and they really want to listen to their partner because obviously they care, right? They want to know what's going on, but they take the words inwards and then they start, as women, what we tend to do is we start analysing all of the words and they're making up a story. And then we've gone off with this story, which probably has absolutely nothing to do with what the man's saying at all. But we've gone off in a story and then we turn that story around and then we go, so what you're saying is like this, when I do this, blah, 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 blah. When the story probably has nothing to do with you whatsoever.
And that's the thing of listening to understand versus listening to respond, right? And we're all very trained in listening to respond. Yeah. And, that comes from a very, very early age because we get told very early, like, why are you doing that? And it's like, I didn't mean that. And so straight away we're in this defense. So, as soon as we get asked, why are you doing that? Like any kind of sentence when we're in that vulnerability of why, our defenses come up. Yeah. So something that can be really powerful is a question of like, so what made you do that? So what was the inspiration or what was alive in you that fed this feeling or this? That's kind of more of an opening question than like why. It can be very direct.
A bit more gentle, obviously, right? Yeah. Like not sort of digging for an answer. You can't really get to an answer when you just go, why? No. You've got to kind of work around it to let that come through authentically and really get to the bottom of what's actually happening.
And I think one of the things as well to really understand as a listener in that is, even though it may be a reflection of what's happening in the relationship right now, the seed of that is from a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so it's about, like you said, dropping that personality of it or the personal attack in what's being shared and understanding that this is a story that goes a lot deeper and really wanting to almost uncover it, go treasure hunting with your partner to, like, what is the seed of this? Like, how can we together shift this?
Yes, and that's so timely because, I mean, like I said, Drew's over. He's overseas at the moment. We're doing a full-on workshop himself because I love that about him. He's always working on himself. We both do, right? And one of our chats before he left, because I could see him starting to, you know what it's like when you go do these really intense workshops, you already start processing everything in your head before you even get there. So I know 2 weeks out he was already starting to sweat, so to speak, and I picked it up straight away. And so I did that. I had to sit with him and allow him to discuss some of the things that were going on for him, and some of that was to do with our relationship, but we both recognize it goes right back to something else, that very little teeny tiny little seed that actually he knows, and most people know is there, but they're scared to lean into that too far because there's obviously a lot of pain and suffering around that issue. But the more that we lean in and the more that we get into that spot and that juiciness, that's where all the healing is, right? That's
exactly
the transformation that happens.
Yeah.
And they get easier and easier and easier as time goes on, and they get less and less and less. Obviously, there's less of them.
Yeah.
But when you're first starting this process, it can be really daunting, don't you think?
I 100% agree. And I thought of an analogy a week or two ago about this kind of work, and it's almost like buying a house or having a house that you have done no work on for decades.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's starting to fall apart, but you're just going into ignorance is bliss. You know, there's a certain room that's completely chaotic. Well, we'll just shut that door. We'll never go in there again.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you initially start doing work on this house, there's so much work to do, right? And it almost seems impossible that you're ever going to get through it.
Yeah.
But once you've gone through and you've cleaned up room by room and done that.
Well, the thing you was just thinking, like, sometimes you change, say it's the paint colour in the room, you go, oh, don't really think I like that. I have to go back and revisit that and change the colour. Don't you find? Like,
exactly.
You try these different modalities and sometimes they don't work, so you're going to try different ones.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. But once you've done, like, the main renovation on this house, then it's just daily maintenance, right?
Yeah.
So there's always work to do, but, you know, that bulk of really doing the renovation is done. And that's kind of like that inner work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so from a man's perspective with toxic masculinity, like, I guess the opposite to that. So what does a healthy masculine look like? So we've got this toxic stuff that comes up that's getting associated now for things that really isn't related or correlated whatsoever. Right? We've got so many things coming up, and I'm sure we could list a whole range of different problems, because I know majority of our men and my male clients, you know, they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard. You know, they're being told to be quiet. They're being told to, you know, like, don't speak about this, don't stand up. If we've seen it, like, in our society right now, where there's stuff going on all around the world, and because people happen to stand up and disagree with something, you know, all of a sudden they're like gangs on the street and they're all this, but people don't have a voice. They're trying to, like, just be heard. They're just everyday people like your neighbours and, you know. Yeah.
And there's a couple of, you know, pinnacle people in that, like Jordan Peterson is one of them, and Chappelle is another, where they're just speaking their opinion, and it's speaking to those vulnerable truths.
Yeah.
And like I was saying before, almost with that identity politics, where now those people are a certain person, so we're not even hearing what they're talking about, even though what they've got to share is really,
how
really
quickly
valuable.
does that happen, right?
So
it's like you want to listen to that, note label. Oh, okay, now they're in that box. Like, I'm sorry, what just happened? I don't know what just happened there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, some of the people who just don't, they like trying to follow something.
Yep.
They oh, well, that's in the box, so I'm going to leave now and go in this other path. When this person actually has something really amazing to say, and we need to hear it.
And you don't even need to agree with it,
Yeah.
but it can activate the thought process of, well, what is then true for me if I was to look into this? And that's the point. Like labels define something that everybody needs to see it the same. And if we don't see it the same, then we're seeing it incorrectly.
Yeah.
Whereas we're all individuals and we all see it differently. So the important thing is to go, all right, that conversation has triggered something inside of me to go, all right, well, what is true? And it's okay that we don't agree with each other, right? It's beautiful that we don't agree. Imagine if we were all the same, how boring the world would be.
Well, what would be the point?
Right?
What would be the point of the whole thing?
We're all here to rub up against each other so that we can discover ourselves.
I'm just going to throw this out there, right? And I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to turn this off. But don't you reckon that a lot of people, they're just lazy?
Yeah.
Like they just go, okay, well, what's the opinion of the day? That's the opinion of the day. I'm just going to go down that route.
Right.
And they don't even look out for anything themselves.
Yeah, I don't need to feel my feelings because I've been told what I should feel.
Yeah, so you've got this amazing man, for example, who might be standing up and saying something, but he's, you know, being put in this little box over there, not being heard. And then the opinion of the day is this other completely out of left field thing. And you're like, oh, well, that's the opinion. I'm going to go for that. And completely disregard what's actually happening over here.
Right. And it happens so much in even bred through school where with that, you know, group mentality of you might be attracted to someone, but then almost the first thought is, well, what will my friends think if I like that person?
Yeah.
What does that mean if I like that person? As opposed to going, I feel something here that I want to discover. And that's just one example. And we do that with just about everything where I like this, but what will that mean if I like this?
Yeah. Gosh, I'm so glad that I just do whatever I want.
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I really do.
Because I feel like it's such hard work to try and work that out. Whereas I think I've come to a point in my life, you know, after even just having this conversation and thinking this for a while actually, where I just do what I want. And it's not in a, you know, like in a bad way to hurt people or anything. I just do what I want and I don't really care like what people think of me. Right. Because if I go against, the thing is, right, if I go against what I really authentically feel and I do that for a long period of time, it comes out in my body straight away.
100%.
Like anxiety, physical symptoms, mental health ways, like energetic ways. Like I can only I can't maintain a lie. I just can't.
And a lot of people, and this is when I do the tantric speed dating events, one of the most powerful exercises is the no exercise, where people tune into their body when their body was screaming, there is no way that I'm going to do that. Yeah. And then the words that came out of their mouth were, okay, right? And then reprogramming that and then someone validating that, thank you for honouring the yes that's inside of you, right, as the most important thing. Yeah. And when you're talking about healthy masculine, it's about owning that for every single individual, we are the most important person in our lives. Yeah. Right? It's that thing of put your own mask on, oxygen mask on first. Let's define that as the oxygen mask. Yeah. And then, you know, then you can support the people around you. Yeah. And the more we're authentic in our magnificence, the more we can be of service. If we are trying to placate everyone and make everyone happy, we actually don't make anyone happy. Whereas if we're authentic in who we are, then the people that resonate with us will be drawn to us, and those that don't resonate with us won't. Yeah. And that's okay. That's how we find our friends. That's how we find our kin. That's, you know, how we create in the world, by having people that support each other, and those that don't support each other don't hang out. Yeah. Whereas so often, you know, you need to hang out with the popular people whether they support you or not.
Yeah, I know. And that's not really living, is it?
It's really
just not living at all. No. I mean, it's just so... Oh, I just want to give people hugs. I really do. Like,
and I want to inspire the fire inside of them, right?
See, there's the feminine, there's the masculine right there, right?
That piece of like inside of everyone. And you know, I was doing a workshop called Mastering Magnificence, right? And for some people that was just almost too far to imagine that they had magnificence within them. Yeah. But it was a personal journey, and I think I might have shared it before, around that inner flame had been so diluted that there was not even a flame left. There was just a glowing ember that needed so much nurturing to come back into a fire that doesn't need to burn anyone else. It's not like a bushfire that's out of control, but it's a solid bonfire that is within me that, gives heat, gives life. It's creation.
God, imagine the world if everyone lived like that.
Yeah.
Like, it'd just be phenomenal, wouldn't it?
It is.
Like, like if everyone just honoured that amazing light that they've got inside them and just live their true authentic self and allow themselves to shine. And, this is one of the biggest things for me in the way that I, especially in my professional life, is that I don't compete. I don't compete. And now, I'm not saying that I don't yell on the sidelines when Charlotte runs a race, right? And I'm not saying that I'm not competitive, but I don't compete with other women. I just don't. And the moment that I get a whiff of someone trying to compete with me or, dull my light, I'm out of there. Yeah. Because all I want to do is inspire other people. All I want to do is see them, I want to see them succeed. I want them to be the best that they possibly can be. Right? I don't want to, push them down and make them feel bad about themselves. What is the point of that? So if we're walking around, everybody radiating and everyone living their true lives, I mean, isn't that the goal?
I think so. I think so. But again, from the youngest of ages, that spirit, that fire gets squashed by our parents because we're being too rowdy, or we're feeling our feelings and having a tantrum, and we're told we're not allowed to. We need to suppress all of our feelings. We need to not be in our truth to comply with the house rules or to comply with what the neighbours will think. I mean, that was one of the things that my mum would say to me over and over, was like, what would the neighbours think? And I'm like,
who cares?
As if I care. And why do you care more about what the neighbours think than what I think? But,
exactly.
This is the programming that we've been brought up in for many of us. And not all of us. Some of us have had, my parents are and were amazing, and everyone's doing the best they can. That's the most important thing. I think that everyone's doing the best they can. And the more we can drop into that place of being compassionate and being graceful in that magnificence, be in your power, but do it gracefully, right?
Yeah.
Stand strong and walk solidly, but with gentle steps. You don't need to be completely oblivious to your surroundings just because I'm going in that direction like a bull in a china shop. Yeah. But walking like a lion that just goes, every step is known.
But a lion has a tribe.
Right.
Right. Has support, has a community around it.
Yeah. Or maybe a panther then.
A panther. Do you know what I mean though?
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that this life isn't about going by yourself. Yes, you come into it alone, you go out of it alone, but you're here for the experience with everybody, with all of us are connected, right? So we want to treat each other with respect and kindness and love and compassion. Yeah. And that's part of the journey as well. And some people, we don't resonate and align with anymore, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with changing our mind either.
And really understanding that everyone comes into our life for a reason and for a season, and to not be attached to that. And sometimes that season is a lifetime. Yeah. Sometimes that season is multiple lifetimes, if that's what you believe in. Yeah. Sometimes it's just a moment on the street that someone looks at you and it's like, wow, that had a huge impact on my day or on how I see something moving forward for the rest of my life. It's amazing that can happen.
It is amazing.
But when we get attached to what it should look like and how long things should last, that's when we start to not listen to our truth.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is that we get attached to stuff, attached to happiness. Yeah. Right? And expecting everything to be happy all the time. Yeah. Yeah. Because, who wants, I don't want to be sad either, but I understand the life experience is equilibrium, right? Yeah. Up, down, left, right, 100%. Has to be. So wherever there's happiness, there's also going to be sadness as well. It's part of it.
Yeah. And that's where, a lot of those learnings come from. Yeah. There's that adage of, you can win or you can learn something, and there is no losing. There is no bad. There is just experience, right? And some experiences don't of course, feel as good as other experiences, but they're all there for reasons.
Yeah.
And we just sometimes want to stay at that peak and hold the peak and pretend that we're always at the peak, even when we're deep in a valley. It's like, no, I'm great right now. It's like, I'm not sure if you are, but if that's what you want to keep telling yourself, that's okay.
This is the thing, right? And I know that I've even sent you a text message before where I went quiet for a bit and then I text you and I said, look, I've just been through the mud. I don't know if you remember that, but even like I go through this stuff all the time. Like everybody does. It's so normal where everything is going amazing, right? Everything is going phenomenal. Like, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome, right? But I also know it's not going to last forever.
No.
And then all of a sudden something happens like, oh, here we go.
And I think that is a real definition of the toxic masculine of wanting to always be winning.
Yes.
Like, no matter what it is, I'm going to win. No matter what I need to do to win, I'm going to win.
Yeah. And
that is the mentality that drives a lot of people in the world. And that is a toxic masculine trait.
Yeah.
So, and the healthy masculine is to really witness what is true, like what is alive in me. And when there are those moments of rest and when there are those moments of learning, that we're acknowledging and honouring that as well.
That's a really great point because I feel like men don't honour their rest enough. Do you find that as well?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's this expectation for men to go all the time because obviously you are running more in the masculine than us, you know, and you are providing and protecting and you're doing all of those things. And so men aren't given the opportunity to actually pause and reflect very often. And I think that's part of the issue is that they don't feel, maybe I'm just speaking out of turn because I'm just thinking about my experience, but they don't feel as though they have permission or they feel guilt. Would that be right?
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
And, you know, there is also that, there is for a lot of men that competitive trait of like, if I'm not overachieving, I'm underachieving because there's that alpha, who's the alpha in my field and I need to be stronger than, richer than, you know, faster than whatever it is in their surroundings, as opposed to, and this is what I do with some of the men's work, is moving that alpha from the group to owning the alpha within themselves and recognizing that there is no one on the planet that's going to be a better Jason than Jason. And the same with Tracy and the same for every person.
Yeah,
and
rock.
if we can, right? Me too.
Like I'm awesome.
That's the point. If we can acknowledge that we are awesome, we are magnificent, and that we do radiate and allow that to radiate in its natural way, right?
Yeah.
And so often we want to redefine what is natural so that we can fit into a piece in the puzzle that isn't even our spot. Yeah. Because that looks like a good spot according to society.
Yeah. Oh, no, I 100% agree with you. I did a negative thought and limiting belief circle on the weekend. And one of the topics, one of the discussion points with the women, because it is a women's circle, is how we receive a compliment and how we're so quick to deflect the compliment, right? So, you know, because that's someone giving us a compliment, if it's in the right intention, they're giving of their energy to us. They're giving of their love and that, and right? And so what I see so much of is people going, oh, yeah, thank you, but blah, 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 right? So completely deflecting. Not only are they not allowing that love into themselves, but they're also not taking the love that person's actually gifted to them as well, right? And I'm sure that's the same for the masculine. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, and I think for the masculine, it's really important to feel acknowledged and to be seen in what he's doing. So it's not about then needing to get the accolades for achieving certain things, but just really being honoured for what he's holding and how he's holding that. And I think that's really powerful for the woman in a relationship with a man, is to really, when you feel him being so present right now, speak to that, reinforce that, let him know what feels good, as opposed to obviously just speaking when he's not doing the things that you think that he should be doing and pointing those ones out.
Do you reckon that happens a lot with the men that you see, is that people are more quicker to point out the negatives than the positives?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think that's for a lot of society that's just the reality that we can identify the faults in ourselves and others And we look for that a lot more than we look for the gifts that we're giving each other and ourselves.
That's so sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really deflating. But yes, and I think that's the thing, is maybe shifting that perspective. And if you're listening to it, maybe this, if this is something that you've noticed in your relationship, maybe switching it around a little bit, and instead of saying anything about any negative, find the positives and see how it happens. Because I know from my experience that the more that I acknowledge and appreciate Drew, the more he is giving of his love to me, right?
For sure. And, that's that recognition piece, because if you acknowledge a man for being supportive, then he is going to build his fire to be more supportive.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to dousing the flames, you want to keep feeding it and just be a nice breeze that bellows that fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so from a guy's perspective, like, what's some of the ways that men can lean into a healthy masculine more, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think for a lot of men, one of the things is that we all have that masculine and feminine, right? And often what happens is there isn't a lot of room for men's feminine to be reinforced and to be supported. And so, for example, the men's retreat that I'm doing, it allows for the men to drop into their feminine and be held by a mature masculine, because the masculine energy is generally more mature and developed in a man than it is in a woman.
Yeah.
And so we as men can provide a lot of safety for a man to drop into that feminine and really let it out, let those layers of emotion and feeling and sadness and whatever is true to be held. And it can be really powerful to do that outside of the relationship as well, without burdening that relationship. Because sometimes if a man goes to his partner and says, look, I need you to hold me like this, the capacity may not be there.
Yeah.
Right. As much as the desire may be, the capacity may not.
100%.
And going and finding men where, and it doesn't need to be my workshop, there are workshops all around it. I'm seeing it more and more that there are these spaces where men are finding a place to witness all of themselves and feel safe in that. So I think that's one of the greatest things, is find other men that you can be magnificent in your full spectrum with, that will hold you in that vulnerability and support you in what it is you're bringing into the world.
And I love what you said just about taking it out of the relationship, because I think that that's one of the fundamental things that sometimes we get caught up in telling too much to our partner, right? That exchange of information, when sometimes we do. We need to go away. Like I said, that's the third time I've said it now, but Drew's overseas, right? He's working on himself, he's not – and he'll come back and he'll tell me all of the things that he's learned and he's taken from it and what's changed for him, and that's amazing. But sometimes it's hard as a partner, and it's exactly the same because men put up with a lot of our stuff too, right? It is a lot for people to deal with the heaviness of any really big or teeny tiny little seeds that need to be navigated with. Yep. It's outside of someone's capacity. They don't have the skills to deal with that, which is why you need to seek out others that are able to support that. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, correct. And there are lots of things out there. There have obviously been these women's circles for quite a while, but there's more and more that are coming out to support men and really dropping into that. And there's a lot of men that are looking for it, which is great. Okay,
so then let's talk about your beautiful retreat that you've got coming up soon, Elements of Man.
Yes, the Elements of Man. So that's 11/11/22. It's starting.
I love the number. 11/11/22, that's perfect.
So on some land in Jarrahdale, there's a mate that's got this beautiful land where the red-tailed cockatoos nest. So there is this real earthiness to it. And we're going to go through the 5 elements. So the very first day when we get together, we're going to drop into earth. And earth is like that energetic of safety and grounding. And the men are just going to come together and really witness one another and kind of lock into being brothers on this land together.
Yeah.
And then the following morning, we're going to go into the water element. And so the water element is more around the fluidity. How do we communicate with one another? And we'll also be going into the fluid retention of how can we hold our seed and bringing that into it as well.
Yeah.
And really allowing ourselves to go to the depths of the emotions as well. That's the thing with water.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then
it's so healing, water.
It's so healing.
So good.
And, like, it's my number one.
Same.
Like the ocean, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And then from there, we're going to go into fire, right?
Yeah.
So bringing that fire, like really honoring ourselves, bringing honor back to the self, honoring the brothers around us, and also allowing us to witness that element of the dark masculine that pulls out his sword and marks the ground and says, here is my line, this is my boundary, and you may not cross.
Yeah.
And holds that with such fierceness that needs to be acknowledged, because there's not a lot of room for men to be able to experience that in our world, because it's often portrayed as being toxic, whereas really it is the man that will defend his family to death, right? And that is honourable, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, we go into air the next morning, and we go into the breath, and we go into how do we share this into the world, right? And really dropping into a breathwork session and allowing ourselves to embrace all that's been moving through our body over the last day and a half.
Yeah.
And then in the last piece is the Akash, or ether or spirit, where we are all connected.
Yeah.
And this is really the energy of love, which is the basis of all vibration, all creation. And we drop into that. And what is our gift? Like, how do we gift this now forward into the world? So, the intention of the workshop is to help men drop into themselves and feel supported by their brothers, tune into what is alive, what is my fire, what is the direction that my fire has, and feel supported in gifting that into the world.
It's amazing. It sounds so transformative.
It feels like it. It's very alive in me. And
I can sense that.
The first workshop that I've done in this design, so I'm excited.
I'm excited for all the men that join, because I feel like this is going to be huge.
Yeah.
You know, I really hope that as many people as possible. Is there like a limit?
Yeah, look, it's going to be a small group, so a maximum of 15 or so.
Yeah.
Just so that we can keep a nice, energetic container in that.
Yeah.
And so there'll be a yurt that we'll be working in, and I love it so much that just 2 weeks ago a child was born inside that yurt.
Wow, that's amazing.
And while we're on the land, there's another young family that may be giving birth on the land while we're there, or just around that. So there is this beautiful, nurturing, birthing energy that is so present on the land, and we get to really drop into our masculine in that really fragile space of birth.
Yeah.
So it feels very alive.
I know, I can tell. I can feel, I'm like, oh, this just sounds amazing. And so I'm going to obviously pop up the tickets at the end of this episode for people who are interested. But I think is it on Humanitics?
Yeah, on Humanitics. And if you look on Humanitics, Elements of Man, you can find it there. Or, jasonbart.xyz is the link to find me.
So, Jason, let's wrap up.
Yes.
Yeah. Where to from here for all of our beautiful men, especially our men that are listening?
I think the most important thing is for all men to understand that they are not toxic.
Yeah.
They are radiant, beautiful human beings that are doing the best they can in the environment that they're in. And for everybody to do their best, to look at the radiance, whether it's a man or a woman, look for that gift, look for that radiance, look for what's special and beautiful about this person, not what don't I like about this person, or how does this person irritate me, but really what gifts can we give each other?
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything that we want to say before we wrap up?
You are magnificent.
Oh, you're amazing. You're beautiful. I just love you, Jason.
I love you too, Tracy. I'm really glad that we got to meet at that retreat that we did together with you and Drew, and
I know.
And that we get to do this.
Exactly. These chats are so important. It's important to normalize what's happening out there and what people are experiencing, men and women, what people are experiencing, and going, you know what, we see you, we hear you, we get it. and there's support. There's people out there that will welcome you with open arms. We're right here.
We are. And, all it takes to shift is for all people to lean into the reality that we're looking for, not worrying about what's been in the past. Obviously, we need to be aware of what's here right now, but really walking towards what we want to create and lean into magnificence, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.
Okay, and hopefully you've enjoyed our session today. Hopefully we didn't trigger you too much, but if you did, make sure you go and have some aftercare. And if you feel as though there's some family and friends who would benefit from this chat, please make sure that you pass this on and leave a 5-star rating, because this is a free offering, people. Like, we do this for free. There is no profit here, right? This is all free information we give with love. So yeah, until next time, take care and be kind to each other. Bye.
The information, views and opinions expressed on this podcast should not be used or treated as a substitute for nutritional, medical, psychological or other advice by a qualified medical health professional. Hosts and guests on the podcast express their own opinions, experiences and conclusions, and nothing on the podcast should be used to diagnose, treat, cure or prevent any medical conditions. The podcast is not intended to replace any medical or mental health treatment. All information and advice provided is for general well-being and does not take individual cases into consideration. Neither Tracy Saltis, guests on the podcast, or any sponsors endorse the opinions, views or conclusions expressed or shared on the podcast. Tracy Saltis takes no responsibility for any symptoms or consequences as a direct or indirect result of this podcast.